The NFL is in the back half of their season now, and there's a ton of teams that are in the playoff hunt, in the Super Bowl hunt, but there's also a good amount of teams that are just flat out done with the season. They're non competitive, they're not trying to actively win games. Will they win some? Absolutely. But I want to go team by team based off of my power rankings from last week and talk about what are the main storylines going forward with these teams. So I'm going to get started here talking about the rebuilding teams from last week. These are the teams that I have as officially rebuilding. None of these teams are competing for the playoffs. None of them are trying to get better during this season in terms of competitiveness. It's all about player development and preparing for the draft. Now, first, I want to talk about the New Orleans Saints. The main storyline here is the team finally going to get out of cap hell? Over the last 4 years, I think the Saints have paid over $200 million dollars in dead cap money. Now, I could be wrong about that. You might want to fact check me on that. But it's clear that 25% of the active roster or the active salary cap is going to players that are not playing. And that's absolutely ridiculous. Derek Carr being one of those. I mean, you still had people from the Drew Brees era getting paid all up until last year. It's absolutely insanity what this team tried to do to stay relevant and stay competitive in the playoffs. And now I'm ripping them right now because we're sitting on the back half of this and we're thinking, well, the season or the playoffs just never really worked out for them. What's the harm here in trying to go the full rebuild? I completely agree with that sentiment. The Saints, every single season that Drew Brees was in from 2008 till he retired, were some way, shape, or form relevant in the playoff conversation later into the season. And that's why you keep trying to swipe the credit card. Drew Brees was a top five quarterback for over a decade in the league at the time that he was playing. If you have a top five quarterback like the Cincinnati Bengals right now, right? They've signed all these massive contracts for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and they were trying to get Trey Hendrickson on a long-term deal. They signed Joe Burrow to this massive contract. You do that because you know you have something special. So while a lot of people are like, wow, the Saints really messed up over the last few years, I kind of disagree. Now, I do think going for Derek Carr was a swing and a miss, but I understand the sentiment, right? You don't want to go into a full tank. You try to find at least at the minimum a transition guy. At the best, you have a guy that bounces back like Derek Carr and brings you back to the playoffs. But I digress. The main storyline here is free agency and the draft will be very promising for the Saints this offseason. Does that mean they're going to be playoff contenders next year? Absolutely not. But they're building the culture to go ahead and create a new era under Kellen Moore, where in the next 2 or 3 seasons, they are perennial NFC South contenders like they were for a very long time. So that's the Saints. Next up, I want to talk about the New York Jets. This team desperately needs any and all offensive help. They trade away Sauce Gardner. They trade away Quinnen Williams. The defense now doesn't look as promising. There is no other team in football that I'm pressing the full on panic button on than the New York Jets. Now, they did receive 3 first round picks and a second round pick for Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner. So I love those moves, but it seems like they're going through a cultural reset, and that's the storyline. Cultural reset. Justin Fields, not the quarterback for the future. Brees Hall was begging to be traded. Sauce Gardner, out of there. Quinnen Williams, out of there. Garrett Wilson never seems happy with this team. It's clear that the holdovers from the Robert Saleh era are not happy with the new direction in the direction that Aaron Glenn is taking this team. And so Aaron Glenn and the new general manager there in New York are just saying, okay, bye. We'll see you later. And while it does seem a little short sighted to do, at the same time, it also seems like the Jets are setting themselves up to go full on in the draft and try to make it work drafting a young quarterback. Now, they did it with Sam Darnold. They did it with Geno Smith. Both of those flopped. And look how they ended up turning out. Geno Smith, multiple year starter somewhere else. Sam Darnold, MVP conversation this year, right? So the Jets are going to be so unbelievably careful, in my opinion, at selecting their new quarterback and building a strong team around them before they get into that spot. That's actually why there were a lot of reports. I can't remember who reported it, so I can't give full credit to. I apologize, but the Jets apparently talked the Cowboys into giving them a 2027 first round pick rather than a 2026 first round draft pick because they're more confident about the quarterbacks coming in the 27 class than they are the 26. So it definitely seems like they have their plan. Now, if Arch Manning somehow ends up playing like a superstar in the last 4 or 5 games of his college career and ends up becoming a first round draft prospect, sure, the Jets would grab him. But I think their plans are to draft a young quarterback in the 2027 draft. So, Jets fans, don't hold your breath. You guys are going to be pretty bad next season as well. Don't get me wrong. I am not surprised, but there seems to be a cohesive plan here. The question is, can this front office and coaching staff withstand the pressures from a very impulsive owner in Woody Johnson? Excuse me, I almost said Woody Allen, the director. Woody Johnson, who has fired Robert Saleh a little hastily, or gotten rid of Aaron Rodgers pretty hastily, fired their GM. There's a lot of turnover there in New York and has been for years. I think Rich Eisen, a longtime Jets fan on his show, actually was talking about he chat GPT'd how many times the Jets have rebuilt their team. And it was like 6 or 7 times in the last 25 years since the start of the 21st century. That's the problem with the Jets. It's a top-down issue. It seems like they might have solved a bit of the executive branch here with the front office. They have a clear plan in mind. The question is will ownership and the fan base be patient enough to get in there? So cultural reset is the storyline here. Next up, let's talk about the Tennessee Titans. I think the storyline here is Cam Ward has got to work. You have to make Cam Ward work. That means hiring a coach that is offensive minded and will do everything in his power to make sure that Cam Ward succeeds. You spent the number 1 overall pick on him. The wide receiver core surrounding him, awful. The offensive line, not good at all. The defense, I think, has played pretty well, especially with the bad circumstance that the offense has put them in pretty much throughout the season. But I digress. Look at that Tennessee offense. Who is the best skilled position player? Tony Pollard? Calvin Ridley? What are we talking about here? There's not really any young, exciting prospects. Now, I've seen Aomanor or Aom. Yeah, I think his name is Aomanor. Alec Aomanor from Stanford. I scouted him. I thought he was an interesting prospect, but nothing really to write home about. There is nothing that excites me about this Tennessee Titans team. I see no young budding stars here. Tajay Spears, I thought maybe he could be an interesting prospect. He's been on the bench or injured for the majority of the season. So there's so much to do in Tennessee. First up, you got to hire a coach. Secondarily, you have to fill out this offensive roster with much better talent from free agency and the draft. That's going to be the hyper focus of this team, in my opinion. So the storyline here is Cam Ward, you got to make him work. You can't waste the number 1 overall pick. How often does that happen? Hardly ever. I mean, Baker Mayfield, even with Cleveland, they tried to make him work for 4 years. And in my opinion, they should have kept going. But once again, I digress. Let's keep going. Let's talk about the Cleveland Browns. You got to find your quarterback. The storyline is you have to find your quarterback. It's clear that it's never going to be Shedeur Sanders. Not because Shedeur isn't good enough. It's because for some reason, the Browns will not give him an opportunity to play on a Sunday. I don't understand it. Dylan Gabriel has been middling, to say the least. I mean, that's actually saying it best. Middling is saying it best. Shedeur Sanders is not going to be the guy. I'm still not certain why that is. I know that he, in my opinion, I scouted him, right? And I rated him a 6.7 out of 10, which was a multiple year starter, a potential Pro Bowler, but on the lower end of that. Never thought he was going to be a top 10 guy in the league. Thought he was worth a late first round pick, but definitely not something like what he was initially projected for, like top 5 pick. Definitely, Shedeur Sanders is not that. And a lot of the reasoning behind that is, even though I can't remember the offensive coordinator off the top of my head from Colorado, he was actually with the Giants for quite some time. Oh man, I can't believe I'm blanking on this. Pat Schumer, right? That's his name. Yeah, I believe it is. He is the offensive coordinator at Colorado, right? And everybody thinks that it's a pro style offense in Colorado. I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it is so far fetched from the NFL, right? Shedeur Sanders was throwing bubble screen after bubble screen. None of his passes were asking him to read one side of the field and then shift. There's just so many critiques I could have for Shedeur Sanders. I think he could be a starter in this league. I scouted him as such, but I don't think he's going to get that opportunity in Cleveland. Obviously, Dylan Gabriel's not the guy. So you got to go and draft another quarterback in the first round. God, the Cleveland Browns, man. I cannot believe we're back here again. This is what they get for trading for Deshaun Watson. So, storyline, got to find the quarterback one. Clearly not on the roster. That is the storyline. Next up, let's talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. In my opinion, the storyline is how much farther are you going to go with Geno Smith and Pete Carroll? It's clear that the fan base is out on Geno Smith being the starting quarterback. I think he'll probably finish out the season as the starter. I think he's leading the league in most interceptions, but Pete Carroll came in to do kind of an immediate turnaround. Antonio Pierce was the head coach there after, oh goodness, John Gruden got fired, right? But here's the thing. Pete Carroll was expected to not win and go to the playoffs, but be better. The Raiders look infinitely worse. Ashton Jeanty, for games, looks like a bust. This was a horrific job at a turnaround. Now, if you want to look at a team that did it right, Jim Harbaugh did it right. Immediately plussed up the Chargers, 7 wins. That's kind of the mentality that a lot of people had on the Raiders. Not that they were going to win 10 games and go to the playoffs, but instead of winning 3 or 4 games, they were going to win 7 or 8, maybe even 8 or 9, because the roster overall, especially defensively, is not that bad. Max Crosby is probably a top 3 pass rusher in the league. There's a lot of other good things to like. Now, the offensive line has been the major issue for Las Vegas. Geno Smith has been another, but there's a lot of other things that are just going on in the background culturally that just have not really panned out. So patience on Pete Carroll and Geno Smith. It's running out. That's the storyline. Now let's talk about the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals, I have an interesting storyline, and I think it's going to pick up some traction as the year goes on. Josh McDaniels, will he be the new head coach of Arizona? It's clear that the Arizona Cardinals are never going to make this work with Kyler Murray, especially under the current coaching staff. Jonathan Gannon, in my opinion, is a really good defensive coach, but he's not head coach material as of right now. He needs to grow in his rah-rah ability and his ability to keep his quarterback healthy. So the second part, he really can't help, right? But quarterback development has been an issue for Arizona. Kyler Murray is no better than he was 4 seasons ago, and that's a major, major issue. I think you've got to bring in an offensive guru. Josh McDaniels has flopped multiple times as a head coach in Denver and in Las Vegas. Will he get a third opportunity? In my opinion, he absolutely will. When you make a guy like Drake May, now Drake May is a second overall pick, but when you make Drake May in year 2 look like an MVP candidate, which right now he's first in MVP odds, you're going to get looks for head coach. And I think the Arizona Cardinals are going to be the team to call him and maybe consider him to be the new head coach, even though it's been a disaster every time he's left New England. So that's my take here. Now let's talk about the Miami Dolphins. My storyline is who should they sell on? Tua is still owed a ton of money. Mike McDaniel, I think, is a good coach, a good offensive-minded coach. You go in and you dog walk the Falcons. You beat the brakes off the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, Tua Tagovailoa has not panned out in any shape, way, or form as a quarterback, as a starting quarterback in this league. The injuries and as well the low performance in some places. Now, he ebbs and flows. Tua was a 4,000-yard passer. I'm not saying that he's completely incapable of being a starter in this league. I'm saying under the current regime, in this current roster, he is not going to pan out as a starter. And so I think you choose which one you want to stick with. You don't have to sell the farm. You do not have to bail on both options and go scorched earth and rebuild this team. There's a lot of good young prospects on this roster that can compete right now. Now, Tyreek Hill is an aging one. You might want to get rid of him or move on from him. I should say not get rid of. He's not a, an object. He is indeed a human being worthy of dignity. So Tyreek Hill, you need to move on from him. I think the age does not line up, and as well as his injury history does not line up with the current trajectory of the Dolphins. I think Mike McDaniel is a fine coach. He is a great X's and O's guy and can absolutely help you build a winner. Now, in my opinion, the Dolphins are not going to listen to what I have to say. They're going to go scorched earth on this and end up going with a different play or a different coaching staff as well as a different offense, and that includes Tua. So I'm not a fan of that, but I'm also not a fan of that. I understand why they want to just get rid of everyone. So let's continue and talk about the New York Giants. I believe this is the last team on this list. The Giants, in my opinion, their storyline is Jackson Dart the guy? Now, a lot of people will say 100%, absolutely, Jackson Dart is the guy. Let me tell you this. Young quarterbacks who go through coaching changes hardly ever work out. Mitch Trubisky is the prime example of this. Now, there have been some other staffs and coaches and quarterbacks that have been able to make these things work, but Jackson Dart is extremely scheme dependent. And I thought Brian Daboll drew up a pretty good one for Dart, but the problem with him now is he does not know how to take contact. Multiple times he's been in concussion protocol. That's no bueno. Now, he is just a rookie, and a lot of this changes with maturity. But I am very concerned that this will be a long-lasting issue, very similarly to Tua. Now, Jackson Dart, the passer, has performed well beyond my expectations so far this season. But how does he look going into next year with this offense and a new staff? I don't know. This front seven with New York, it's going to be hard to keep them together. There's a lot of alphas on that roster, as well as a lot of players that need new contracts. The affordability issue comes into play. Now, Dart is a young quarterback, so he's a little cheap. I think it's worth keeping him around. He's played his way into being the starter for at least the start of next year. But a new coaching staff, how patient are they going to be with him? It's a good question. Now, he's a first round pick. So the front office might be like, well, you've got to make him work, but I just don't know yet. Jackson Dart, is he going to be the guy in New York? That's the storyline for the New York Giants. Now let's get into some semi-competitive teams. Now, these are some teams that can absolutely make some noise, not necessarily in the playoffs, but against playoff teams. These are teams like the Carolina Panthers. They are the primary example here. They'll go on the road and beat Green Bay, which what in the hell? It's one of the biggest upsets of the season, but then they'll turn around and get the doors blown off them by the Saints. Make that make sense. It makes zero sense, but I digress. Let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. Their storyline here, I've got this written down, is should Joe Burrow be coming back this soon? The prospects are very low. Joe Burrow has really been made of glass throughout his entire NFL career. Unfortunately, I'm not trying to say, oh, he's not worthy of being a franchise quarterback because he's injured all the time. This is a top 3 quarterback in the league when he's healthy. The key word in that sentence is win. And as of recently, it's not been often. We need to see Joe Burrow healthy, and we need to see him win some playoff games. But this season, I don't think is the one. I don't think you rush him back from this injury. I think you just let him heal and move on and call it quits on the year and move on to next season. Now, a lot of people have rumored that there are a lot of people rumoring that they could be moving off of Joe Burrow. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But now let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys. Now, this is one of the more interesting teams, in my opinion. They're kind of out of the playoff conversation. You've got to win 10 games to get into a wild card position, in my opinion. And the Cowboys are 3-5-1. They would have to finish the season 7-1-0. I don't see that happening at all. So with the Cowboys, the question is, and the storyline is it win now time? I mean, you trade for Quinnen Williams, right? You trade for Logan Wilson. You traded away Micah Parsons. What's the deal? What's the motive? Where are you guys going with this? I'm not terribly sure. Dak Prescott, in my opinion, a top 10 quarterback. He was playing at an MVP level early on this season. George Pickens has played unbelievable. CeeDee Lamb has been injured, but when he's on the field, I think he's not played poorly. He had a few drops in the game versus Philadelphia, but outside of that, I thought he's had a pretty solid season. I want to see where this Cowboys team goes. But next up, I want to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars. My storyline for them is they have to shore up the defense. The Jags just this past week were up massive on the Texans and blew a fourth quarter lead. Now, does that have to do with coaching or personnel? I'm not exactly sure, but either way, I mean, when I say I'm not sure, I haven't looked at the tape, so I'd have to go back and look at the tape. But I am certain that there have been multiple games this year for the Jags that their defense has quite frankly blown these games. Now, the offense has been up and down, but you expect that with a new offensive minded head coach adopting a new system with Trevor Lawrence, who's now in his third different system in what, 5 years? So I give the offense a little bit of leeway. The defense has got to step up and be better, whether that means making a coordinator change or whether that means making some personnel changes. So that's my storyline for the Jags. How will they shore up the defense either in this season or going into next year? The Carolina Panthers. Now, this is a very interesting team to me. I want to talk about defining Bryce Young's ceiling. That's the storyline. How far can you really go with Bryce Young? Can you win a Super Bowl with him? My answer is absolutely not. Let me tell you. Now, the Panthers have been a very bad team overall. I'm not putting this all on Bryce Young. This is not his fault holistically. But versus teams with a winning record, the Carolina Panthers, as Bryce Young is the starter, are 2-20 over the 3 years that he's been with the Panthers. 2-20, ladies and gentlemen. That is not good. That is not bad. That is not terrible. That is atrocious. That is awful. Once again, I'm not necessarily putting all of the blame on him. I'm identifying the fact that we would have to see a miracle turnaround for the Panthers to become a relevant organization first, and then secondarily, a playoff contender, and then tertiarily, a Super Bowl contender under a quarterback who would have to dig this winning record out of the grave. Bryce Young, can he work in the NFL? In my opinion, probably not, but he definitely is never going to work in Carolina simply because the timeline does not add up. He needs 3 more years of development, in my opinion, because of his limitations. You have to perfect this offensive system around the Panthers. And some weeks you see that they do it, and then other ones you see that it completely flops. I am not a fan of what the Panthers have going on right now, but I am a fan of trying to make it work because he is one of the what was he, the number 1 pick? Yeah, he was the number 1 pick just 2.5 years ago. So I understand the sentiment, but Bryce Young, you got to define his ceiling. Well, let's talk about the Texans. Offensive line. Offensive line is the only thing you have to fix with the Houston Texans. Wide receiver core is great. Defense is elite. CJ Stroud is a multiple time playoff winner. What else do you need? You just need a better offensive line. You need to be able to run the football better. You need to be able to protect CJ Stroud. That's it. And then maybe some injury stuff. I mean, I know a lot of players have gotten injured, but losing guys like Terron Armstead a few years ago, I believe, or no, not Terron Armstead, excuse me, Laramie Tunsil. These are crucial to what's going on in Houston. You have to fix the offensive line. So now let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons. Is Raheem Morris the coach to do this? There have been several weeks where the Atlanta Falcons look like a playoff contending team. But then there's other weeks where you go up against the Dolphins, and not only does the offense look awful, but the team overall looks woefully unprepared. And if you don't want to take my word for it, take the words of Raheem Morris himself. He said the team was not prepared. The coaching staff didn't do a good enough job to prepare them. It's the truth. There are just so many games for the Falcons that you sit there and you wonder, like, what in the world? Primary example of what the Falcons could be. The game versus the Patriots. They're a missed extra point from going into overtime. Where is that Falcons team at on a week in, week out basis? It's not. So is Raheem Morris the coach for the future? As of right now, it looks like he's completely out of it. I need to see him do it on a week in, week out basis. So that's the storyline there. For the Commanders, the storyline is, how do you get younger? The defense average age, I believe, is 30 or maybe 29 and a half. The offense, yes, you've got Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel. They're both in their late 20s. Jaden Daniels is so unbelievably young. You are trying to build a Super Bowl contender. I get it. But at the same time, you have to recognize that this team in 3 years is going to be half of them are going to be retired. So what do you do with Jaden Daniels then? Because you got to pay him a lot of money. You're going to draft a bunch of good young players. You're going to get lucky. I doubt it. So I think the Commanders have to get younger. Obviously this season is a wash. The Commanders are not making the playoffs. You got to move on to next season. What a drop off, by the way, from last season. Extremely disappointing, but a lot of that has to do with Jaden Daniels. Can you get him healthy and can you keep him healthy is kind of a secondary storyline. Last but certainly not least, on the semi-competitive scale, we got the Minnesota Vikings. Is JJ McCarthy the guy? And I know that is a baffling question to ask because I believe he only has like 4 or 5 starts, maybe not even that, maybe 3 or 4 starts under his belt. But this Minnesota Vikings team is ready to win now. They went 13-4 last year, and they're probably going to miss the playoffs this season. Their roster is just as good as they were last year. The question was quarterback, and they have not figured it out yet. So how do you keep this staff together? Kevin O'Connell, in my opinion, is a top 5 coach in the league, and he might get fired this season if they completely flop out and JJ McCarthy doesn't work out. A lot of this has to do with injuries, but the other part of this has to do with the fact that the Vikings themselves were not ready to take on a young developing quarterback. They were ready to win now. That's the major issue here. So let's move on and talk about some playoff teams. Playoff teams. Let's get to some storylines. Chicago Bears. Caleb Williams. How does he continue to develop? We've seen some growth here under Ben Johnson. But at the same time, and according to Ben Johnson, especially in the preseason, there are still some days where they take steps back. Caleb Williams is the number 1 overall pick. You have to make him work. Can they do it? So far, they're 6-3 as of this recording, and it looks like they're going to make the playoffs. And I'm extremely happy to say that because I am a Caleb Williams fan. I believe that he is the quarterback for the future there in Chicago. He's probably going to be the first 4,500-yard passer in Bears history, and the Bears are going to be perennial playoff contenders with him. But I want to see that take place. I think the storyline is here. How does he continue to grow? We've seen some of the theatrical plays where he's scrambling in the backfield for 4 or 5 seconds, and then he finds a guy 15 yards down the field and throws a dime. But for him to be a perennial playoff contender, he's going to have to start carving up teams pre-snap. He's going to have to start carving up teams on his first read. It can't be a scramble drill every time you need to go win a game. You've got to be able to be methodical, and that's the next step of growth for Caleb Williams. Now with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think the major storyline is, can this team get healthy? Wide receiver, obviously, is the crux of this issue, but we've seen multiple injuries in other positions as well. A lot of this is going to be limiting. Baker Mayfield and this Buccaneers team with a fully healthy roster is a Super Bowl contender, in my opinion. But the fact that they're going to miss Mike Evans for the rest of the year, Chris Godwin, what's really happened with him? I mean, we saw his gruesome leg injury last season, but he's yet to come back and play consistently. Where is that happening? Now, Emeka Ibuka has been unbelievable so far this season. Baker Mayfield has also been great. A lot of the hype is starting to fall off as they just lost a couple weeks ago, but I digress. I think the Buccaneers are. Oh, and another person as well. Bucky Irving has missed so many games with his foot injury. So there's a lot to take in here. I think that the Buccaneers are a Super Bowl contender, but the injuries that they have, the lingering injuries that they have, are going to limit them, and that's going to be the storyline. The San Francisco 49ers, more of the same. Can they get healthy? Kyle Shanahan should be up for Coach of the Year, in my opinion. They have been phenomenal. I know they just got the doors blown off them by the Rams. But the fact that they're 6-3 and firmly in the playoff hunt and firmly in the divisional title race is a testament to the resilience of this team, this coaching staff, and the front office. I think that this 49ers team could absolutely compete for a Super Bowl if they had a healthy roster and Brock Purdy was playing at the peak of his power. But right now, we don't see that. That's why I have them in this playoff tier. We're going to have to see what happens with the injury status. Mac Jones, Brock Purdy going back and forth is not going to get you to the playoffs or get you a playoff victory. So I digress. The Seattle Seahawks, they kind of face the same question. The storyline here is Sam Darnold the guy? He has been playing at an MVP level. I believe he's second or third in MVP odds. I think he's played phenomenally. Jackson Smith-Njigba as well has come along as probably maybe the best wide receiver in football right now. I was going to say top 3, but I think he might be the best football receiver in football right now. So is Sam Darnold the guy that's going to get you over the top? The Seahawks are all in on it. And I kind of agree. This Seahawks team reminds me a lot of what the 49ers were under Jimmy Garoppolo and then a couple years ago under Brock Purdy. Their defense is stacked with a lot of younger talent. Their offense has got some young budding stars. They play very physical. The West Coast offense, Clint Kubiak is one of the best OCs in football, in my opinion. Didn't work out in New Orleans, but that New Orleans system was not built for what Seattle is doing. They're playing physical football. They're actually passing the majority of the time. They trust Sam Darnold at that high of a level. So I love this team. Sam Darnold, in my opinion, is the guy, but that's the storyline, that question mark. Next up, speaking of is this guy the guy? Bo Nix. I put him in the same conversation as I do Bryce Young right now. What are his limitations? How limiting is this for the Denver Broncos? Their defense, once again, top 3 in the league. We all know this. Patrick Surtain is the reigning defensive player of the year, I believe. Or maybe it was a couple years ago. I digress. He's one of the best corners in the league, one of the best corners that football has ever seen. And this pass rush has been well above expectations. The offense has been unbelievably disappointing. The hype train around Bo Nix was filled to the brim at the start of the season, but now it's not. I know they keep winning games, but this reminds me a lot of the Pittsburgh Steelers a few years ago with Ben Roethlisberger. They started off 11-1 or something like that, and then they finished the season 11-5 and lost in the first round of the playoffs. That's exactly how I view this Denver Broncos team. I think the exact same scenario plays out for them. Now, all that being said, that could change if they go out and beat Kansas City this week at home. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. The storyline is, what are Bo Nix limitations? Now let's talk about the Los Angeles Chargers. This is another hypothetical year for Justin Herbert. That's the storyline. Justin Herbert, the king of hypotheticals. Rashawn Slater, out for the season. Joe Alt, out for the season. Najee Harris, out for the season. Amarion Hampton, I haven't seen him in forever. The offense is crippled. Now, the wide receiver core is healthy. Justin Herbert has still been playing at a high level. The defense has been playing better as well. But I just don't think you can have that many injuries to the core of your offense and succeed in the playoffs. So, will the Chargers win a playoff game? Probably not. Will they make the playoffs? Probably. And they'll have to go on the road to a cold environment like Buffalo or Kansas City or Baltimore or something along those lines. And they'll say, well, what could have been if we had just had our 2 starting offensive tackles who are some of the best in football and one of our running backs be healthy, and maybe later on in the season, one of their best defensive players will get hurt. So a lot of hypotheticals there. It's the same story with Justin Herbert, and I'm not really blaming him either. So now let's talk about the New England Patriots. Can they make the leap is the storyline. Drake May in year 2, MVP level play, one of the best deep ball throwers in the league. I have been unbelievably surprised by how good this Patriots team is. I'm shocked, but at the same time, I'm not. Mike Vrabel, I went on record multiple times and talked about how psychotic the Tennessee Titans were to get rid of him. There's clearly some bad blood between the ownership and Mike Vrabel, but I'm so glad that he got another coaching job, especially with a team that he played with in New England. This is the perfect setup for a new dynasty. I love Drake May's play. He's doing it, by the way, with an aging Stephon Diggs, Kayshon Boutte, and Kyle Williams and Hunter Henry, right? It's not like he's doing it with creme de la creme, wide receiver prospects or running backs. Will Campbell has played great. This Patriots team looks like they can win a playoff game, but to ask them to go from not making the playoffs to making the Super Bowl in just 1 year's time, that's a little too much to ask. So I want to see, can they surprise me? Can they make that leap and compete for an AFC title? We'll have to wait and see. Now, speaking of wait and see, the Baltimore Ravens. Can this team turn it around? I mean, you want to talk about digging something out the mud. The Bengals tried to do it last year. They failed. They started off in too deep of a hole. I kind of think the same for the Ravens, but right now I believe they're the favorites to win the division. It's crazy. And this kind of reminds me of the New York Giants back in 2008 and 2011 when they beat the Patriots, right? It was just a perfect storm. And maybe this is the perfect storm that the Ravens needed. Now, defensive tackle is a major position of need that they didn't solve at the trade deadline. I'm curious to see how they fill that hole, but Lamar Jackson is going to return to MVP form. I can promise you that. This Ravens offense is going to start clicking again. They scored 40 points on the Buffalo Bills and were up by 15 points with 5 minutes to go in week 1. They can do it again. Now let's talk about their counterpart, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Their storyline is, what is Mike Tomlin's future? There have been several disappointing losses so far this season. They just flopped on Sunday Night Football against the Chargers. Aaron Rodgers looks like a shell of himself. Of course, he's in his 40s. But where is Mike Tomlin going from here? Is he going to be a part of a potential rebuild? Because Aaron Rodgers has pretty clearly indicated this is going to be his last year. If not, it's going to be next season. And so the questions need to be answered. What does this team look like going into next season? I'm really curious to know. But overall, I'm very surprised, I guess, how well they've played in some of these matchups. Now, when you play playoff teams like Green Bay and Los Angeles, you get the doors blown off of you. That's not very surprising, but the offense has looked fairly cohesive throughout this season. I want to see them continue to do it, but Mike Tomlin's future is going to be the question because a lot of people were calling for his job last year. The calls aren't really coming from inside the house as of yet, but if the Steelers somehow miss the playoffs, Mike Tomlin will probably be out of there. So that being said, these are my playoff teams. Let's talk about last but certainly not least, my Super Bowl contenders. The Detroit Lions are number one. The storyline that I want to talk about, specifically with Jared Goff. The storyline is, can Jared Goff be the quarterback to win them a game? Ladies and gentlemen, in the last 3 seasons, the Lions are 3-5 when they do not have 100 yards rushing. Why? Because the game is in Jared Goff's hands. You can't have a losing record and go into the playoffs like that, because I can guarantee you the Philadelphia Eagles, the Green Bay Packers, the Los Angeles Rams are going to be keyed in on stopping the run. Every team will. This is what the Lions are known for. So can Jared Goff win a playoff game by himself? Debatable. I need to see it. I need to see it before I can believe it. The Lions also might not need to do that, right? I mean, they could just impose their will. They've done it against multiple top-tier teams so far this season, and last year they made it to the NFC Championship just 2 years ago, right? And we're up big against the 49ers by imposing their will. So maybe they can do that. Speaking of imposing their will, the Philadelphia Eagles. My storyline for them is they need to return to the physicality that they had last year. Now, a lot of that has to do with the fact that their offensive line has been unbelievably injured. I need to see some more out of this offensive line in terms of getting healthy. But overall, I am very optimistic about their return to physicality. Saquon Barkley, to me, has been playing injured throughout this season. If they could just rest him and just ride Tank Bigsby for a while, I'd love that. Now, speaking of physicality, the Green Bay Packers, the offense has to get working. I understand the calls for Matt LaFleur's firing. Now, I think it would be stupid, but I understand why people are frustrated. This Packers offense is teeming with talent. What does this offense look like without Tucker Kraft? So far, miserable. They are going to have to fix these issues. There's a lot of offensive woes here for these NFC teams. Now, for the Rams, counterpart to all the other 3 NFC teams, the storyline is, can you ride Stafford? I think they can. Matthew Stafford is having the best season of his career, in my opinion. So far this year, he has 5 games with 3 or more passing touchdowns. He's put up 300 yards multiple times. The Rams are 7-2. They're in the driver's seat to win the division. All they have to do is beat Seattle. And they'll be riding potentially a number 1 seed. So I love where the Los Angeles Rams are at right now. I want to see, can they ride Stafford one more time all the way to the Super Bowl? I think they can. Now let's talk about my Super Bowl contenders for the AFC. This is a little more shaky than it was a few weeks ago. But for starters, Kansas City. My storyline is, when will we see the offensive explosion? Rashee Rice is one of the best wide receivers in football. Travis Kelce is still a relevant tight end. You got Hollywood Brown. Running back has been an issue, but once one of these guys get healthy, certainly it'll get a little bit better. But Patrick Mahomes is a top 3 quarterback, guys. I know that the statistics have dropped off, but we're going to see him come back and play like the best quarterback in football, maybe the second greatest quarterback of all time. That will happen. The question is when will it happen? We've yet to see it so far this year. I think it will happen later in the season, but I digress. The Buffalo Bills. The storyline is, can they stop these disastrous flops? There have been multiple times in Buffalo Bills history under Sean McDermott where they just get the doors blown off of them, and they shouldn't. They lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars a few years ago. Made no sense. They just got mollywopped by the Miami Dolphins. It makes no sense. The Bills have done this time and time again. They're going to have to fix that, or Sean McDermott, his coaching job, or his job coaching, is in serious conversation. That's my storyline for the Buffalo Bills. Can they stop flopping? And last but certainly not least, the best team in football as of right now, the Indianapolis Colts. Kind of similar to Sam Darnold. Is Danny Dimes really the guy to bring a Super Bowl to Indianapolis? Now, rest in peace to Jim Irsay. I think his daughter has done a phenomenal job putting together this team. They go in on Sauce Gardner. Cornerback has been a major weakness. Travarius Ward has been injured. He's coming back. Sauce Gardner is now in this lineup. That is unbelievable, right? I am so shocked to say that the Colts are in the best position to win the Super Bowl right now with Daniel Jones as their quarterback. It just goes to show that the right system, the right coaching staff, and the right roster can do anything. And as of right now, the Colts are in prime position to compete, dominate, and insert their physicality into all of this, especially if they're the number one seed and the AFC goes through Indianapolis. Playing in that dome, that's the best thing for Indianapolis. I love where they're at right now. I want to see some more. Daniel Jones is going to have to do this on the road a couple more times this season. He flopped against Pittsburgh on the road. I think he will rebound, hopefully. But as of right now, the Colts are my major storyline here. They're the team to follow. So that being said, thank you guys all so much for watching this video. Let me know which team you like and which team you want to make the Super Bowl or make the playoffs. And give me your storylines that you want to follow into this season and into the offseason. So thank you guys all so much for watching. We will see you next time. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, and comment. I appreciate it all. See you guys next time.